I decided I was driving up to Pier to perform as often as I could just so that I could keep sharp and I could keep doing stuff. But I didn't know anything that was going on in Milwaukee. I knew of Chicago almost as though it was like this fantastical wonderland, like I was, some person living in one of the states of Rome and being like, oh, the Colosseum, like it was like, oh, I could go there. But I was like, how could I go there? I live in Jackson. It's over 2 hours away. And I made the decision. I was like, I'm essentially going to treat this like my master's. I'm going to go down to Chicago every week.
Okay.
And I'm going to take level 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and do as much performance down in Illinois and Chicago at I.O. as I could.
This episode of the Ampéritif podcast is produced and distributed by Be Connected, a social media management firm in Northeast Wisconsin.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 9 of the Ampéritif podcast. With me today is a good friend of mine, CJ Guzan.
Hello.
I just like to say that.
I appreciate
Guzan
that.
It's kind of a fun name.
I'm glad that you not only do you like saying it, but you also say it correctly, which I'm never insulted by people who don't, because it's almost always Guzan or Guzan, which is like, I get it. That makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Right.
I mean, that one telemarketer who called me when I was 12 and said Fuzan, I don't know what he was speaking, but he obviously took notes in bad cursive. But at the same time, I love it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, happy to get it right. So plus, I think even if you would tell me that it's not pronounced Guzan, I would have told you to change your mind.
I'm really glad that you're the first person who's ever said that to me.
Because it should be pronounced Guzan, because that just has a certain pizzazz to it. Like,
Thank you.
Anyway.
My last name has pizzazz. Did you hear that, everybody?
Yeah, right.
I can get used to this.
All right. Well, so CJ is, let's see, an actor, an improv comic.
Yes.
An artist, and a musician. Did I miss anything? A dad.
A dad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you a husband?
I'm a husband.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That led to the dad.
Well, they don't always.
They
go
don't
in that
always.
order.
They don't have to. Absolutely not. I just, hi, Allison. No, I would say, yeah. That's. But I've also done some writing that I've gotten.
So an author.
An author, but not of any books or anything like that. Like scripts and things like that. But yeah,
Sure.
that's about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Given the acting component, and I'm certainly, of the people that I've known and worked with in the acting realm, they all seem to have the writing, producing, directing. So it's not uncommon for there to be multiple roles.
Yeah.
So. But in any case, before we get into CJ's life history, let's try this cocktail, CJ.
Yes, please.
And we'll do that first, and then I'll get into the ingredients.
Excellent. I'm going to take a sip from the top, and then I'm going to take a sip from the bottom. Ooh. That hits the right spots, Mike.
So now, when we were prepping for the podcast, CJ was kind of telling me a little bit about the type of cocktails that he likes, and a gin and tonic was one of the examples, or one of the types of beverages. So that's what this is. This is a gin and tonic, or at least a gin and tonic inspired cocktail. It does have gin, it does have tonic. And so, CJ, as far as gin and tonics go, how does this come off? Does it come off as a gin and tonic, or does it feel like something else?
It does come off as a gin and tonic, but with a slightly more citrus kind of flavor to it, which I very much enjoy. I love that. First off, presentation-wise, that's at least a 9 out of 10. That's it. I thought that these were designer glasses from the 50s, but they're not. Those are actually. I actually asked Mike right when I got in there. I was like, "Look at those! Like those are actually kiwis."
Yeah. So when I was doing that, one of the kiwis fell to the bottom of the glass, and I couldn't get it out with like disturbing all the other ones. It was a bit of a trick.
We had to make a sacrifice, and it paid off. It really did. I like this because in this case, I think, as you were saying, you were worried that because it had taken a while to get set up that it would be too watered down, and it's on the edge of that, but I don't think that it's too watered down.
Okay.
I think that this is like this is a good gin and tonic for people who want to be introduced to gin and tonics but not go all the way.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment, right? Because it's very palatable.
Yeah.
It's not too gin and tonic-y.
Yep.
But it does have
and then
the gin and tonic.
just a weird recommendation for those of you drinking through straws, straw enthusiasts out there. I would say you notice how it's like it gets watery at the top and then it has all of the booze at the bottom.
Uh-huh.
I always do this.
Sure.
You got to play it like a slide whistle.
Yeah, I like it.
When you do that, then you get a little bit of a mix of the whole thing. This is really good. Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah.
You
bet.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to reach around and see if I can get some of these ingredients, but of course it starts with gin.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to grab this gin and I'm going to go to my camera here and hold up. I always do this. It's hard for me to turn it the right way, but this is Stockholm's Brainier, I think. Brainieri, maybe? I always struggle with
Brainieri, I think.
Pronunciation
of these. Is it an umlaut over the top of the A? So bra?
Bra.
I think so.
Neri.
Brainieri.
Well, I wanted to make it an Enye, but that would be Spanish, I suppose.
Why not? Add a tilde at the top.
Right. But pink gin, and it says an organic blend with rhubarb, rose petals, and grape skins.
Grape skins.
So, of course, you could use any gin with this recipe, but that's the one I went with. All right. And then we got 2/3 of an ounce or 20 milliliters of kiwi and courgette syrup. Okay, now I have to hold up the kiwi and courgette syrup to the camera.
Yep, clearly labeled.
And I think this either looks like some kind of alien juice or maybe swamp juice.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe sometime before you leave, just take a teaspoon and throw it in there, and this is like blow your mind delicious.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you about
syrup, essentially.
Let me tell you about the homemade syrup here. Yes, exactly. It's a simple syrup. So this has in it 1 courgette. Now we were talking about this before the show, and I had to look up how to pronounce this. It's Courgette. It's a zucchini.
So much more regal.
Right, it is, and I stuck with that because those who've listened and watched the podcast will know that Lulu is the podcast mixologist. Mm-hmm. Now Lulu is from the UK, or she lives in the UK, but she's actually an Italian expat living in the UK. But of course, so all of my recipes come with, they're in metric, and they use words like courgette instead of zucchini. And so the next ingredient is castor sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I Googled courgette, and I'm like, zucchini. I can get a zucchini. Castor sugar. You can't buy castor sugar in the United States.
Is it because it's called something else?
Well...
Or because it's just like, is it like Choco Bake, which only exists in Europe now? And you have to make it yourself because they just discontinued that.
Discontinued it,
okay.
Yeah. Not per se. Now you can. It is basically the same as extra fine sugar.
Oh.
Which is like between granulated sugar
and powdered
sugar. So like in the middle.
Confectioner's sugar, right? Would that be? It's different than that.
That is something different.
Oh.
Yes, all this research I
You've learned so much.
I know.
No, please, I'm a sponge. Let's do it.
Yeah. So. I couldn't find it anywhere, but again, my trusty Woodman's, I swear, I've got to get a sponsorship from the folks at Woodman's because
really do.
They come through every time. I've got some obscure ingredient that Lulu puts into a cocktail.
I second the motion.
Yeah, so Woodman's, if you're listening, sponsorship potential. We could do all the ingredients. We could talk about it. But anyway, yeah, so extra fine or super fine or ultra fine, those are all kind of the same thing as castor sugar.
Sure.
And now there's a whole backstory about why they called castor, had something to do with the way they dispensed it. But in any case, juice of half a lemon and the lemon peel, and then boiling water, but only 50 milliliters of boiling water, which I had to do a conversion. That's about a quarter of a cup. And 200 grams of the castor sugar is about a cup. I actually weighed it to make sure, and it looked like about a cup. But anyway, so then you soak all of those ingredients, and it looks like this green swamp fluid. And it's kind of sticky and chunky, and you let that sit for a while, and then you come back and you put the hot water in to dissolve the rest of the sugar. And then you strain it through like a cheesecloth to get all the chunks out and get down to the very nice filtered liquid that you see here. So doesn't look appetizing, I don't think. It looks kind of like, what is that weird green fluid? Blow your mind delicious.
It is like right on the edge, isn't it? It's like one of those things that when you're 3 and a toddler and you're like, that looks amazing, and mom's like, no.
Yeah, don't touch it. That's going to cause something strange to grow somewhere.
You don't need more limbs.
Yeah. So all right, so we're having trouble getting through the ingredients, but I just found the courgette and kiwi syrup very.
I'll let you go.
very noteworthy. So all right. Back to the top. We've got the gin, we've got the kiwi and courgette syrup, then some lime juice, and then equal parts tonic water and soda water. Now you shake all of that except for the tonic and soda water, and then when you're done shaking it in a mixing glass, then you can pour in the tonic water and the soda water. And of course, tonic water, gin and tonic, that's the classic ingredient. Okay, so that's the cocktail.
Nice.
One more nugget.
A nugget? What is it?
Tonic water versus soda water or club soda versus seltzer water.
Oh.
They're all different.
Yes, I know. I know what
three
the
different
difference
things
is between tonic water and like club soda, I think.
Yeah.
I think I do.
Well, seltzer water and club soda, and I only know this because
what is the difference?
I went to, and I thought I should just buy seltzer water because it's cheaper. And I'm like that.
That's the driving force.
But this is this is the club soda. It is carbonated water, sodium bicarbonate, salt, potassium sulfate. Okay. So those are the ingredients.
Okay.
Seltzer water is just water with fizz.
Okay. All right. So it's just carbonated water versus club soda, which has a little bit of salt content.
A little bit of salt, and I guess sodium bicarbonate is just another salt. Potassium sulfate, some salt.
Huh. I wouldn't have thought that. Yeah. And then tonic water is quinine. Right. Is there like an off-brand that's Atabrine?
That'd be a great research project. I have no idea. But quinine sounds like something you should die from. Like it just doesn't sound healthy.
And yet it's the only thing that's going to stop you from dying in some cases in malaria-infested country.
Good to know.
Yeah, there you go.
Right,
you got to take quinine.
See, now
there you go.
Listen to the Ampéritif podcast, and you're going to learn all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of learning all kinds of things, we need to get into learning a little bit more about our guest, CJ Guzan.
Thank you.
And, CJ, I fell asleep on the job here, I think, in my eagerness to get us going.
Okay.
I failed to play your intro music. So here it is. CJ Guzan's intro music. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest on episode 9 of the Ampéritif podcast, CJ Guzan.
Knock, knock, who's there? Can you hear me? I got a joke to tell. I got a joke to tell you. Knock, knock, who cares? Can you tell me? It's kinda hard to sell. And sometimes hard to get through. And if I gave you some money, would you?
All right. Well, there it is, CJ. Of course, I had to go digging to find that in the underbelly of of YouTube.
The
I'm
internet.
Kidding.
Yeah.
No, that, of course, that was right on your YouTube profile. The TheSiegeMachine, right? Isn't that?
Yeah. The CJ Machine.
So-
One word. The CJ Machine.
The
yeah.
Siege Machine.
That brings back memories. I enjoyed that one. That one was a live one that I didn't. That one was a recorded one with some of the audio from the audience actually in it in the beginning. But the thing is, I wanted to. I did that just on the piano for I think it was a 24-hour theater collective thing at the Green Room in De Pere years ago. I think it was like 2016, 2017.
Okay.
And I had 24 hours to write a song.
Oh,
and,
sure.
And it was
Yeah.
a song, about being the more like, the sad comedian.
Yeah. So I went through all of the songs on your YouTube,
Oh my goodness.
trying to find one that I thought would be like the appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me was there's a lot of melancholy
Mm-hmm.
undertones in a lot of the music that you write.
Yeah. Yeah, at the time, I would say I've been all over the place. I think that's kind of how I started because music was a way of me focusing a little bit more away from the things that were troubling me at the time, or
Sure.
It was a great method of escapism, and also because that I learned how to play just by ear. It's like I can't read sheet music. I don't know
I
how
love
to.
that.
I
I
can't.
love that.
I wish
Yeah.
I could, and I know I get it, right? Like I get
Sure.
how it works. I just can't look at it and then make it work. And I love that's one of the reasons why I love music is because the rules are there because they reflect the way that music functions as like a part of physics.
Right.
Whereas they're not like an invention that you have to follow. It's just that they work.
The rules came later.
Yeah, the rules were discovered more or less, and that I very much enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very cool. I'd love to know that about you, that you can't really read sheet music. You just play by ear. I've always played by ear in my music. I shouldn't say always.
But you can.
I play more by ear than I do by music. I can read music, but I play as much really by ear.
Is it more for review when you're looking at sheet music, or is it?
Yeah, it's like it reminds me of the structure of the song. Like, oh, okay, yeah, this is where we are in the song, and kind of what the progression of melody or that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The more that I look at sheet music, my experience with sheet music really came from like going to church as a kid every week, twice a week, because I went to Catholic school from kindergarten
Nice. Good for you.
through college. So I was completely Catholic educated, and that was which meant two things: one, you're guilty, and two, there's a load of music. There's a load of the fanfare essentially of big churches and audio, and
There is.
like
Yeah.
it is a beautiful thing, and that was the only thing that I liked about going to church was the music, and being able to look at the sheet music and then trying to guess why the notes were doing that while we were singing it that way. It was like, oh, okay, I can see how that was going. And as I've done way more and more and more, you start to realize that even though I can't read sheet music, I can see the waves. And that's how you play anyway, is that you ride the wave of what's happening, right? Like you're surfing it.
Yeah.
And that I love that idea because that's kind of what it feels like, right? And can you speak to that from your own experience? Is that kind of how it feels like to you? What is the actual feeling when you're really into it and you're in the zone? Like how would you describe what's going on in your brain when you're in the zone playing?
Orgasm.
I'd agree with that. And not for you, but for me. I mean, maybe for you. We'll talk later. But it is.
Not to be too much of a joke, but I actually was. So I play a lot of jazz, and in jazz you have a lot of improv solos. In improv solos, to me, are like you really sort of have to get rid of everything around you.
Yeah.
And when you really nail an improv solo, there's just this sort of dump of dopamine.
That's what I was just about to say. It is a dopamine rush, and it is a beautiful thing. And we should definitely launch into that about improv.
Oh,
and
sure,
jazz
yeah, like improv comedy, yeah.
Because that's how I teach a lot of my students, is that I liken a show to a jazz band.
Sure.
Because that's how a good group should be able to perform, is that, let's say if it's like a short form team that is doing a lot of fast-paced games, like a Whose Line Is It Anyway style thing. You have a voice booth person who's doing sound effects, lighting, music, all of the basic structure of the show. And then you have a host, someone who's either in the show and is just kind of taking care of the segments at the beginning, the in-between, and at the end, or they're only doing that, or they're doing that and they're performing. And the host and the voice booth person are the drummer and the bassist, right? They have to keep everything going and make sure that the entire thing is flowing so that everyone can have their solos. because without them, no one necessarily knows where the structure is going or coming from. And then they can then be influenced a little bit by the solos as you go, so that you
Sure.
can increase
Yeah.
the tempo, decrease, just kind of pick up the pace or slow it down depending on what is needed and what's being presented. And that's not my analogy, but it is probably the most accurate
Sure.
analogy for how improv works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how connected all of it is.
That makes a lot of sense. And so that rhythm section that's really kind of holding down the beat, the melody, or at least not the melody, but the chord structure, so that those doing the improv can. So there's a similar element to that in improv comedy, is what you're telling me.
Yep, exactly. It's
Okay.
it's about pacing. Right now, currently, I teach level 4 at the Interchange Theater Co-op, and level 4 is, so level 1's like, hey everyone, it's improv time. Let's learn how to do it. And it's basically like getting you into the rhythm of things so that you can really start to fall in love with it. Because if taught well and if presented in the right atmosphere, it's almost inevitable. Like you will become addicted to it. And then level 2 is, okay, everyone, let's learn how to do 2-person scenes really well, and then learn forms of improv, long form improv, which is different than short form. Short form's like short games of anywhere between 4 and 8 minutes long or so, and then a long form is basically get one suggestion, and then you follow a form that can then go up to an hour. So it can usually be anywhere between about 22 minutes to an hour of one show based off of one suggestion or a number of sets within that hour. And the level 2 is figuring out with those forms how to do really good 2-person scenes. Level 3 is we're not really doing so much hand-holding anymore. You kind of have to figure out what you're doing on your own. Then level 4, and that's, what else do we do in level 3? We teach even more advanced forms of improv, of long-form improv, things that you need to get a lot of reps in, right? Because if you don't have the reps, you won't know where you are. And as long as everyone knows where you are, you can then have the freedom in order to operate in those limited spaces.
Sure.
And then level 4, which is my favorite to teach, it's right before capstone. Capstone is the group basically gets to make their own show over the course of 8 weeks and create their own form. They create their own show. They figure it all out. But level 4 is the Herald. And the Herald was pioneered in Chicago by Glenn, what is his name? I can never remember his name. Del Close. So Del Close was, and Charna Halpern. And they were the two people that then also started I.O., I believe, which I was also a part of for a few years in Chicago. And they were, they created this form called the Herald, which is essentially, you get a suggestion, and from that suggestion, you then all do an opening group game. And the group game is just basically, how do we advance the suggestion in order to become a whole slew of ideas? Basically putting everything into the melting pot. Once it's all into the melting pot, you then do 1A, 1B, and 1C. And so those are 3 different scenes, so completely different from each other. Then you do another group game. Another group game is everyone on stage playing some game to then refocus and essentially take all of the bits that everyone caught from the first beat, which is the 1A, 1B, 1C. The best way I could put it in terms of how the group games work is, imagine you have 2 people do a 2-minute scene, and then they do it in 1 minute, the same scene in 1 minute, and then they do the same scene in 30 seconds, and then they do the same scene in 10 seconds. And that's literally an exercise that we'll do, because then what you have to do is cut away all the fat and all the trimmings.
Yeah.
And then that way you have nothing but the meat. And so the second group game is that, okay, what do we actually like? Where do we want to go? Then the second beat happens, 2A, 2B, 2C. So you have the A column of scenes is starting to form. So the A's are related, the B's are related, the C's are related, and then they might even start to intermingle. Then you have a third group game where you refocus again. You take all the things that are still running and the new ideas. And then the third beat is 3A, 3B, 3C. Everything should start to interact, mix together. All the characters should start to show up in each other's worlds. There should be references. There should be crossovers. It is immensely impressive to see even just a moderately well done Herald, because of all the connections that people are making up. But within that form, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, so CJ, first I'm going to jump in so you can take a breath, grab a drink.
Thank you.
What I loved about everything we just heard was the passion. Like CJ's like spewing his passion for improv comedy.
Thank you for stopping me.
No, it's all good. So one of the things I was kind of thinking about is, I wonder if you could give me like a short lesson on the podcast.
Ooh.
Could that be done, or would it be hard to condense it into a?
Oh, it probably could. It depends on what kind of a lesson you would be looking for. Like, what would you be?
Well, let's
Yeah.
let's come back to it.
Yeah, let's come back to it. I'll start
'Cause
thinking about that.
Yeah, I'll let your subconscious work on it for a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
we sort of are all over the place already. It took too long for the cocktail because it was very interesting to me. Hopefully other people thought it was interesting. Lulu did an outstanding job yet
It's
again.
really good. Mhm.
And then what I like to do after the cocktail, actually, first of all, before we move on,
Yeah.
I just remembered we've got to name the cocktail.
Oh, that's right.
So
What do we call it?
if you have anything that's like, oh yeah, this is the name, feel free to shout it out. Otherwise, I'll come back to it before we wrap up.
Okay. Well, I don't mind. Like the TheSiegeMachine is not bad, right? Like it's
Uh-huh.
not a bad thing. If we're gonna go completely narcissistically basing
Well,
it on me.
Yeah, honestly, I had the same thought, but I didn't want to plant that in your head.
Okay, thank you for that. But I like it. I always like that. I used to spell siege in high school. I used to spell it Ceege, and then
Yeah.
one day I was like, wait a minute, it's already a word. And it's a better word than Ceege. It's Siege, as in like a siege, a literal siege machine. I had never even considered it.
Yeah.
And so that, and the thing is, all of my close friends would call me Siege because it's CJ.
Sure,
Which
yeah.
I mean, it's up to the audience to try and figure out what that stands for. But but I've always been known as CJ. But yeah, the TheSiegeMachine. I like
The
that.
TheSiegeMachine. Let's
That's
do it.
not bad. That is
Let's,
a very
yeah, I
good
mean,
gin and tonic.
sometimes like the easy answer is the right answer.
I think so. Simplicity is bliss. That's
So-
wonderful.
I'm getting my cocktail is sweating a little bit. It's
Oh,
very,
no.
It's very humid on the lake, and I'm ruining the recipe card.
Save
here.
the
It's
notes.
getting-
Save the document.
I'm just going to set it over here. Okay. So the TheSiegeMachine, everybody, this is it. Now the kiwi have settled to the bottom of the glass, but it still looks good. And but this is the TheSiegeMachine, a gin and tonic inspired cocktail with swamp fluid. And
That's appropriate. It's appropriate. Apt. Very apt.
and yeah, otherwise known as the kiwi courgette syrup.
Syrup.
Yeah.
So there was. I know you wanted me to like potentially teach you like a rapid fire lesson. I'm
Yeah.
still working on exactly what that lesson would be, but I have these little tidbits of things that might be a little bit eye opening into like how we train improvisers, especially in long form. Little bit of background is that short form improvisers have a much easier time becoming long form improvisers than long form improvisers have becoming short form improvisers.
Okay.
Because short form improvisers are trained to be really lickety split fast, quick, because you have to be.
Sure.
And you only have so much time, and the speed can always, the way that I say it, just like when we're arriving for an acting gig or something like that, and you're in a role, always go all out the first time, because it's always better to be told by the director to tone it down or to back off on it than it is for them to tell you to do more.
Sure.
Because that's always been like a point of embarrassment for me, because it's like, oh no, I didn't actually give him what he wanted the first time, because they should be able to see it within whatever you do. So if you give them everything, it'll just be taking bits away, which is refinement.
Yeah.
So
really
that's
great, profound advice, by the way.
right. Like I like that way of describing it.
Yeah.
So then what we do in improv for the long form performers is we tell them, you're going to have to keep trying, and you're going to have to exist well beyond the range of ideas and planning that you might still be kind of beholden to. Because you have this idea in your mind that you're usually not aware of. It's usually just a mechanism that you learn as you grow up and as you become an adult and as you just try to make life work. You gain control, and we already went through the, giving control is the greatest control. But you try to control your own thought processes, and you try to control where you're going to go with it. But in improv, you can't do that. You can present an idea, but how do you present an idea that is genuinely original and is not encumbered by a whole bunch of supposed prerequisites for what's going to happen after that, which you can kind of tell is a weight, right? Because that's not going to be improv, and it's going to go in another direction immediately, and it'll be no one's fault but your own, because you weighted it down with this idea that, oh no, my plan, because I brought my idea out. And even if they yes and it, you don't know how they're going to yes and it. So the best place to go as an improviser is well past all of the ideas, all of the planning, all of the options that you give yourself and your team, to the void. And I refer to it as the void because it's that moment when you start to panic, kind of probably how you're feeling right now with having such a terrible day, where you're like, how could this get any worse, without tempting fate. But you start to think about, how can this get worse? Or I don't have anything. I don't know where to go. And that's when I say, so keep not trying to get somewhere, just keep going, And they keep going, and they keep going, and they keep going, and they keep going, and they're anxious, and they're nervous, and they're stressed out, and they're tense, and they don't know what they're doing, and they still don't know what they're doing, and they accept that they don't know what they're doing, and they accept that they're tense, and they accept that they're anxious, and they accept that they can just take a breath and start to work it out, and then they accept that they don't know where they're going, but they accept that they have to do it themselves, and they accept that they can bring it somewhere that they're familiar with, and they accept that they have ideas that they can bring into this, and they accept that there is no plan and no ammunition for them to call on, and then all of a sudden, really good improv happens. That's really genuinely what it is. Well beyond, you have to push them to the point where they genuinely have no idea what they're capable of, and they think that there's nowhere to go. They think that everything has been exhausted. Then you get great improv. And every time you get great improv, because what it does is it forces you to eliminate everything outside of that stage with your scene partners. It forces your mind to do that. There's a game I teach in musical improv called moving and emoting. And the first thing I tell everyone is, this exercise is going to go way longer than you expect. And Megan Heinrich, who's a fantastic musician, music teacher, and performer with me in the Musical Improv Intensive, she then plays the keys, and she just makes up this constantly evolving song that can go anywhere from like Enya to like a funk song to something that's just beats and slight rhythms that change over time. But everyone is then encouraged to move around the room in the theater and just try to emote what the music is telling them to, essentially. Like, think about it, hear it, what's happening? Do you want a monologue? Do anything. But you can't tell someone do anything, because if everything's an option, nothing is. So you have to create a box. And the box is limits. And as soon as you have those limits, you then have creative freedom, because it's much easier to explore the full space of this cube that you have than it is to try and be like, yeah, well, answer the questions of the universe, right? Like, that's tough. But if you present a room, and so you force them to basically be like, without any belittlement or anything that's going to hurt them or make them feel more uncomfortable than it naturally should feel, because it should feel uncomfortable. And it should feel like you don't know what you're doing. And then at about 40 minutes into this, they then usually by then evolve into doing something that they're not thinking about. And then they keep doing it and they keep evolving, because they're just listening to the music, because everything's gone. Everything in their head is gone, because they don't know what else to think about, because it's still not ending. And it's still not ending. And it's still going. And then all of a sudden at the end, this has happened in two of the four classes we've run, everyone starts just harmonizing. They weren't told to do that. And not everyone can even sing who's necessarily in the musical improv class. They want to, they try to, but then they end up doing it anyway. And it's like, okay, I guess it worked. And it's so weird seeing that work over and over and over and over again with all of the students that try it. And even if they panic and freak out, and then I usually go over and talk to them and try and just like be like, what is this making you anxious? Is this making you feel, and then they tell me, and like, okay, well then walk around and talk about that. Talk about how it makes you anxious. Talk about talk about it, sing about that, or just even sit down and stand up and see what happens with that. And as time goes on, they always break into some level of acceptance that they can just flow with it. Like when we were talking about music earlier, it's finding that wave, catching it and riding it. And at the end of the day, all we're doing is training you to be an active listener and use it as an offensive tool. You're listening, you're taking, you're utilizing. That's it.
So I know that sounds simple, but there were a few other things that I heard when going back to the beginning, when you described kind of this acceptance. I heard surrender.
In a way, yeah.
And so again, kind of thinking about getting uncomfortable, but then sort of surrendering to it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of how I would distill what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a profound, not just sort of make you better, at improv, but I think this is what you were getting at when you talked about being a better person.
Yeah.
And the idea of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
surrendering to that in order to allow the things that you're capable of to come out.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
so anyway, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
as
No,
you were talking.
you're absolutely right. And that's a very
Yeah.
good way of simplifying it. It's just learning that you are capable of navigating it. Because
Yeah.
so many people,
Yeah. And it's scary,
it's very scary, and that's what
Yeah.
stops people from doing it.
right? Yeah.
Most of my job as corporate education director at the theater is talking to corporate clients who want a show
Sure.
and basically just working with them to be like, okay, what else do your people want so that I can calm them down, that we're not going to pick on them in the audience, and we're not going to drag them
Sure.
up on stage, because it's like, if we want volunteers, first of all,
Uh-huh.
if we get a volunteer,
Yep.
and if we don't have anyone who wants to volunteer, then we don't take a volunteer, because we don't want to embarrass somebody.
Sure.
We want to make them look good. But if they
Right.
don't want to do it,
Right.
then that's,
right.
so it's without the kind of stigma that comes with surrendering, it is kind of just like it's accepting that it is okay to be in an uncomfortable situation. You can
Mhm.
navigate it. And something that a common denominator between Heather and myself, Tony Patelis,
Mhm.
the actor. I was in his workshop, and he told me, I sent him a couple of questions one time because I was going to be teaching a workshop, and I wanted to know what his advice was. And he gave me amazing advice. He said, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you fail on stage? And I was like, I might just be a little embarrassed. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
that's it. And then guess what? You get to try again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get to do it again. It'll be fine. You'll go to sleep. And then maybe you'll be a little bit more embarrassed the next day, and then you'll wake up, and then, no,
Right. Right. yeah.
it's just surprisingly straightforward if you just get past the fact that it's like,
Mhm.
the time is coming, then it's here, then it passes, and then it's gone. And that's fine, because that's literally how it's always worked. It's okay, you'll be fine, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
it.
Yeah. So earlier you were talking a little bit about long form versus short form, and I've
Mhm.
always kind of had this sense that I wouldn't be good at improv because I don't think fast enough. But I'm a jazz musician, and I
Yeah.
do improv solos,
Uh-huh.
but there's no thinking involved in those, by the way.
Are you sure?
Well, the point is I don't like consciously think about like what am I going to play next,
I don't either.
right? And I'm sure the same thing is true about improv, and that's
Mhm.
something I could probably learn, but that's my knee-jerk reaction. Like I'm just too slow. I'd be like, elephant.
It's always elephant, isn't it? It really is. Huh.
But long form, no, I've actually done improv in like in acting in if we're doing a scene and we need to improv an argument or things like that. But
Mhm.
those to me sound like they'd be more the long form that you're talking about. That I've done okay at.
Mhm.
I think it's the punchline thing that I worry about. But if I could be in an improv troupe and be the straight guy, I think I could do that really well.
Yeah. You just need to be familiar with what some of the other people, like what their personalities are and how they like to work as
Sure.
characters.
Yeah.
Because not to say that
Uh-huh.
everyone has like a repertoire, as it were, but that being friendly with the other people is very, very important. There's a reason why like improv breakups as they are, so not like people who are dating, but people who perform as a group or people who are in a troupe, when they split up because there's a disagreement, like usually something pretty big, it's huge. It's bad. It's really bad. And the
Sure.
reason why is because you have to be quite vulnerable
Sure.
with these other people.
Right.
And the same thing
Right.
works with any kind of a cohesive artistic group, right? A creative group. You need
Yeah.
to be able to
Yeah.
trust those other people. And if anything breaches that, even if it's not if anything actually breaches it, if it's perceived
Sure.
that something has been breached, even
Yeah.
get close, that's sometimes enough for it to kind of throw things to the wind. So it's kind of like when you say thinking fast, how do you train someone to think fast? How would you train someone to think fast?
I would say stop thinking.
Well, there you go. That's how you train people to perform improv.
Right, yeah.
It really is, because
Yeah.
the thing is, if you're the analogy that I use now, I don't know if it's an analogy or a metaphor. I think it's an analogy. For my level 4 students, because you can actively tell when a performer is thinking about it or had a plan. You can see it. It's so blatantly obvious that you're like, ugh. You know, you can sometimes I'll be like, we're gonna start over. I want you to just react. I want you to listen, and then I want you to come in with something. You know, whatever is established.
Sure.
Listen. And the way that I liken it to is that you're a paratrooper. You're in the back of the plane, and the red light is on. Listening is waiting for the green light to come on, and then you jump, because you can't just be like, oh, and there's a good time for me. Maybe I'll find, I have an idea. When can I shoehorn it in? No, it'll never come. It'll never happen. You will still shoehorn it in, and guess what we'll all see? A performer shoehorning something in. We won't see a natural reaction. So you have to be basically there, either watching or with your eyes closed, kind of just thinking about what is being said as it's being said. And as you're getting fed that, you'll just feel the light turn green, and then you go out. Another thing I tell my students, it's like breathing. When you do it for long enough and you just get the reps, it's like breathing. You're not thinking about it. You're just having fun with a bunch of other performers on stage and impressing a full, paying audience. Like, they love watching that.
Right.
And it's really strange. But you saying that you can't do it, I don't believe it for a second, because A, you already said that you already can. I've seen it. So you already can do it. But then also the short form is not about being faster. It's just about adapting to the format of each of the games, adapting to the gimmick.
Right.
Essentially, and figuring out how to yes and people without actually saying yes and.
Right.
And that's it. Remember, it's not actually agreeing; it's the performers agreeing, not the characters.
So while you were talking, I had this thought that a conversation is a lot like improv, because, like in our conversation today, and what I genuinely try to do on every podcast is genuinely listen to the things my guest is saying. I've seen so many interviews where the host or the person doing the interview is actually not even listening to what the person's saying, and they'll just go, and then just ask another question. Like they didn't even hear the answer they just got. And I'm like,
that's
oh my
great.
gosh.
And where were you born?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so there's an element of, I think, improv, if you will, in the interview process and listening to, responding to the things that you're saying, right, as a guest. So anyway, I just wanted to connect some dots there.
Yeah, they're all connected. All of these things that we're like, they genuinely are. It's so weird how it's like when you get to like junior year of high school and all of a sudden you're watching Mississippi Burning in 3 different classes at the same time. You're like, okay, I guess this is relevant in these 3 classes. It was such a weird. That was a true story. But I was like, ooh, we get to watch that scene with Willem Dafoe again. And that was all it was. It's like, that was a good Thursday. It was a very good Thursday. Anyway. Don't ask me why. I don't remember why, but
yeah, right. Now we got to find that scene and throw it in here. But so obviously you've learned a little bit about CJ, and he's an improv comic. In addition to his being an artist and being an actor and being a musician, and so the improv theater in Milwaukee that you started. So tell me about that. How do you come to that decision? This to me is where you become an entrepreneur and a business person.
Yeah. So in order to make sense of that, we have to go to when I left Green Bay. Because I left Green Bay in 2017 because my wife Allison got a job at a public school in West Bend, and it was obviously going to be a really good job. She was very excited about it. It was a pretty good school district. And so we were like, let's do it. But I was also leaving everything. You know what I mean? It was like, well, she has a job. I'm going to have nothing. You know what I mean? So it was really kind of like just biting the bullet and being like, well, this is what she's doing. Sure. She's really good at it.
Yep.
I will do it.
Yep.
And after a very short amount of time living in Jackson in an especially crummy apartment that was just not fun. It was a not fun place. There were worse places, but it wasn't that great. And Jackson, right by West Bend there. I decided I was driving up to Pier to perform as often as I could just so that I could keep sharp and I could keep doing stuff, but I didn't know anything that was going on in Milwaukee. I knew of Chicago almost as though it was like this fantastical wonderland, like I was, some person living in one of the states of Rome and being like, oh, the Colosseum, like it was like, oh, I could go there. But I was like, how could I go there? I live in Jackson. It's over 2 hours away. And I made the decision. I was like, I'm essentially going to treat this like my master's. I'm going to go down to Chicago every week.
Okay.
And I'm going to take level 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and do as much performance down in Illinois and Chicago at I.O. as I could. I did
Sure.
my research. I asked around. I asked my friends who had moved to Chicago and people who'd been there that I knew. And I asked them all, and I basically took, where do I want to go? Do I want to go to the Annoyance? Do I want to go to Second City? Do I want to go to I.O.? And the way that I saw it was that Second City had become a little bit like a factory. They still produce amazing performers and do amazing things, but it was a little bit more like they're more after your money for the regular like improv classes, and it's not so much improv as much as it's sketch. Not to say that they don't do a load of really good improv with really good improvisers, they do, but I was like, that's not really what I'm looking for. I don't
Sure.
want to go to
Yeah.
sketch. I want to do better improv. And so then I looked at the Annoyance too, and there wasn't a lot about the Annoyance at the time, which is unfortunate because the Annoyance is a really great theater. And my co-head of education at the Interchange, Vince Figueroa, went to Annoyance, and so he had a lot of experience there and also met a lot of the same people. But I went to I.O. because that was the place in which the Herald had begun with Del Close and Sharna Halpern, and I wanted to go to the place where people were really genuinely trying to push the boundaries and figure out what long form really was about. And I didn't really know so much about long form at the time, other than I didn't know what was in Milwaukee, but I figured I could just skip over that, go to Chicago and figure it out. So when I went to Chicago, and I was there for almost 3 years, this was right before the pandemic. I graduated right before like end of 2019. I was like, finally, life can begin. What good timing. And but going through that process was like a master's program because I was doing the drive. It got me much more used to that aspect of working. And I had already been kind of used to it, but it's 5 hours of driving each, Friday when you do the classes, or Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And so I was doing that. And when I was down there, I met Brian Jack, who's an actor and performer there. And he basically got me into contact with Mike Patet, who is one of the writers for Epic Rap Battles of History, if you've ever seen that YouTube channel or show or those series. And he got me in contact with Mike, who then got me in contact with a place called Mojo Dojo that was happening in Milwaukee. And I was like, oh, there is stuff happening in Milwaukee. There's improv.
Yeah.
Excellent. I had no idea. I knew of Comedy Sports a little bit because
Sure.
the troupe I was with was at one point a Comedy Sports. So it was very similar.
Yeah.
And so I had already been a part of that camp. So I was like, I'll try something different. I don't really like the competitive nature of it, even though it shouldn't be competitive. Some people take it competitively. So I was like, nah, I'd rather always work as a cohesive team. I go to Mojo Dojo. I love Mojo Dojo. It goes really well. I meet a lot of great people. Then that company becomes Ampersand. Ampersand then falls apart in the middle of the pandemic for a lot of different reasons, but it falls apart. And I had even, for that company, with one of the people who's in the theater right now, two of them, Tim Farley and Eric Kokonis, the three of us essentially, with a lot of little bits of help from a lot of other people who too many to name, but they all really helped a lot. We built the theater. We built the stage. We built the risers. We built the voice booth. We built the bar. We have a bar, and then we're also in the basement of a church. And it has super high ceilings. We have a 100-person theater, 99-person theater, and a bar. And the bar is basically how we then run it. But what ended up happening is we built it. That theater then basically shut down. And during the pandemic, pretty much not the end of 2020, right in the beginning, it was about August. I got a call from Eric. And Eric says, I'm going to make a new theater, and I'm going to have it be a co-op. And I loved the idea of a co-op because it was going to finally take away the one most reliably destabilizing. It was going to take away the one most reliably destabilizing factor in all improv troupes, and that is it's owned by one guy, or two guys or three guys, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that always leads to a lack of innovation, a lack of keeping up with the times, a lack of
Sure.
enthusiasm about what you're doing. And so he was like, I am willing to make this. Would you be willing to help? And I was like, well, what do you want me to do? And he's like, what can you do? And I was like, well, I had just come off of doing Squeezebox Comedy, which was a traveling full band improv show with Kevin and Craig Knit and Tucker Diedrich, as well as Sean Yan every once in a while, as well as I think Maggie Durnell helped us out once or twice. A lot of performers had been involved in that. And we were traveling full band, and I was like, okay, I knew how to book shows, and I knew how to run them, and I knew how to produce. So then I was like, okay, I can do that. I could figure out our roadshow stuff, even though, no one's going anywhere. It's only Zoom. So I had to figure out, like, okay, well, how do I make this work? And we built this theater as a co-op after much discussion to be this slow burn, essentially. Because all those other theaters were usually either built to become a for-profit enterprise, obviously for a very few, or they were built off of one show, like a successful show that were then like, we should start a business, let's start a business off of this. And then they try to make money. But the thing is, both of those elements are a little too fickle in terms of longevity. So we were thinking, let's build something that has endurance and stamina kind of in the running or in the design. And let's have it be something that can evolve and adapt. And let's have it be something in which there is more of a democratic process, and that everything's a little bit slower, and it's very dissatisfying in the beginning to be a part of that process. But it is so incredibly eye-opening and useful because you set precedent with every decision you make, instead of just figuring this out and then worrying about the consequences later. Because everyone's worried about the consequences later, because the entire objective of the co-op is to exist later and to grow later and to continually ramp up. And so as we were designing it, and we had a whole bunch of huge like roadblocks and speed bumps and things that genuinely would have, and did in a couple of cases for other people, other places that had similar situations, would have torn them apart. And it didn't. That person, that situation, it was solved, they left, or they were kicked out, or whatever it was, and they moved on. And the thing is, it's like, okay, all right, we're still here. We're still doing this. And there's a lot more to that than that. But we managed to make it through. And every single thing that we did was setting precedent. We can do it. We have experience with this. Oh, we got burned. Well, we won't get burned again, right? We'll learn about this. We'll implement that thing. And so we went and we signed in this building in Milwaukee with our lawyer Jan, who's a fantastic guy, and we all signed this sheet, and I'm one of the founding signatories for the theater, and it was, and I'm just one part of it. Remember, I'm just one part of it. I'm glad that I've had a relatively significant role, and the thing is, this theater actually is ramping up. It's growing. We have full classes. It was like from the beginning, it's the Zoom era is when we started.
Yeah.
Like we couldn't be in person, and we started it that way. And working with Kevin, I actually figured out how to make Zoom shows enjoyable. And I'm not even kidding, which is such a weird thing because no one ever believes me. But the GLHF people, the Great Lakes Hemophilia Foundation people that we still work with, that I did just a workshop with them 2 weeks ago. Sure. They were our first client. And they genuinely had such an amazing time at our Zoom shows, they didn't think it was possible. And then a whole nother company had such a great time at our Zoom shows. They also, I asked everybody at the end, I was like, could you like poll your employees who watched, like, we just see if they'll actually if they enjoyed it. Like, please tell them to be honest. Like, if they hated it, let us know. And they all came back positive. Sure. Like, even the, like, grizzled guy who's, like, he doesn't care about anything was like, yeah, it was good. I was like, yes, we got him.
Good for you.
Steve liked us. And so it was a good sign. So, yeah, and it built.
So I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
One, real quick. Do you still do the Zoom shows? No. Okay.
No, because
so
if we can do it in
just
person.
a pandemic only kind of thing that you did.
It's locked and loaded for the next pandemic. let's just keep that one in the back of our mind. Well, it's ready.
Let's hope.
I just thought it was amazing that it was possible. Yeah. And we actually pulled it off.
That is amazing. So, all right. And so now a little bit deeper question.
Yeah.
Help me understand the co-op component of this. You guys founded this. There's a bunch of signatures on a piece of paper.
Yep.
But you don't own it?
We own it too.
Okay.
There's a lot of owners. So the thing is, you can buy a share to become an owner, and you can buy it once. You get one share.
Okay.
And that way every person can have a vested interest. When you become an owner, you get discounts on things like classes. So, like $50 is knocked off or whatever. And then you also get like less, the owner's discount at the bar, owner's discount of ticket prices. So it's essentially your investment that then you make back over the course of attending shows and and actually enjoying the theater. So then we then also have this voting process that we're finally ready to actually implement for our steering committee, because we're still in a steering committee phase, even though we started in 2020 and it's 2024. If not by this year, by next year, we'll be able to then actually be able to hopefully have these elections in which people can then be elected for the positions that we have. And then when they're elected, one thing that's really important about the steering committee or about these leadership positions is that there's not just one person running each thing. The artistic department has 2 artistic directors. The education department has Vince Figueroa and myself. I'm the corporate education director. He's the in-house education director. And the 2 of us talk about everything together so that we can be coordinated. And then you have the community department. And the community department is a great one because nobody has a community department, but we were like, there is a need to make sure that the people in charge have some kind of a liaison system so that we understand what the actual public and the populace in our theater are saying and thinking and doing. Because remember, it's all about optics. It's not about necessarily what actually is happening, because we want to make sure what's actually happening is also what's, one-to-one with the optics. But the perception is very key, not like in a propaganda way, but like more, we have to make sure that if we're doing it this way, that people know that we're doing it this way and that they don't think that we're doing it some other way. You know what I mean? Because we want to make sure that the actual community knows what we're doing. One of the biggest problems that we ran into when we were starting is that we kept trying to cater to the quote-unquote improv community as it was. And that was a bad idea, because that was not the community that wanted to necessarily work with us in this new group. They were all kind of different minds. They didn't, and that's fine. It's like they got to do what they got to do. So what we then ended up learning, or was really Vince and I, who were like, we're going to get classes going. And we're going to just keep doing the classes, and we're going to focus on classes and getting people in level 1 and level 2 and start level 2 to level 3 and just start building it. And because of that, specifically because of students, we now have a community that is the interchange community. People who have brought their friends in to learn improv, to perform. And the thing is, we also share. That's another thing. We want to be a hub. We don't want to be just another competitor. So there's comedy sports, which would technically, I guess, be our competitor. But we're like, yeah, all the people who perform here perform over there. And the people who perform there are absolutely welcome to come and perform over here. And that's how we like doing it, because there can be this possessive thing that also happens in a lot of improv troupes, where it's like, you are my performer. You can't perform with another group, which I've lived through. It's not fun to basically have someone claim that they own you. So you kind of get to this position where you then are also driven by, you have this impetus to actually do the most ethical plan, like to actually implement the best possible thing, because you are not going to last forever in this position, but the theater might. And if the theater is going to exist, you had better set it up so that it's ready to not have this like authoritarian rule. Right. Yeah. And that's how we designed it. And
it's really interesting. So so you talked about people coming in and having a share. Are they paying for those shares?
They pay one time, yeah.
One time. And how do you set the price of those shares?
So initially it was, it's basically like what is the value that we could put on, I can't remember what the thing was. How did we figure that out? It was a long time ago when we actually figured it out. But it was first we were like, okay, this is what we think it would be. It was like $200 or something like that, $250. And because we were brand new, we were like, let's start it a little bit lower and have a year for people to join at that lower rate and let them know that there's a year, and then we'll bump it up to what it should be. And that got us a big crop of people who are then owners. And then we bumped it up to kind of what it should be right now. And then when you get that, the way that we estimated the value was more, I think, along the lines of how much are they going to be getting out of the theater? And then how are they going to participate? How are they going to be able to participate in the theater? Because it shouldn't just be for discounts, right? So everyone who's an owner becomes, they also have one vote for, one single vote, of course, for choosing who the steering committee members will be, or who at the elections, when we finally are able to run them soon, because there's a lot of logistics behind an election.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So as a founder, though, you still only have one vote?
Yep.
Just like anybody else that would have come in later.
Yep.
And does the price change over time?
Yeah, it'll probably change a little bit over time because
Okay,
it's one of those
alright.
things where
But it's set more based on value of what they get out of the experience than it is like value of an organization. So if I think of buying a share of a company, there's some value that's established. That company is worth something.
I think it's half and half.
Okay.
I think it's half and half because
Okay.
the thing is the theater is becoming vastly more valuable than it was like last year.
It's
And
got
last
a
year
revenue
was
stream. And
and it all goes right back into
brand
the theater.
equity.
Yeah. It goes back into the theater, and that's kind of another reason why we like it so much is that we kind of built it to be as altruistic as possible. Where like for corporate education, I make sure that the split of what goes to the theater and what goes to the performers is even. And when I do shows, like none of the steering committee members are paid for their work. We all do it because we want to do it and we want to make it better, and because most of us have been there from the beginning. And the reason why I did it is because, or why I do it is because I genuinely just want to see it succeed, and I want to see all those people who otherwise would have been in a system in which they would have been taken advantage of. I'd like to see them actually be able to flourish in an environment in which that won't happen, in which they'll actually have a voice, they'll be heard, they can be wrong and not chastised for it.
Right,
They can learn,
Well, this is interesting because it's a bunch of entertainers who are trying to check their ego at the door. That's really what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing thing to accomplish, by the way. Because I think ego kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah, it's integral to a degree, I would say.
Yeah, in some ways it's not necessarily bad.
No.
You're putting on a show. There's an element of wanting to be admired in some way as part of that, and I think that's to some extent ego driven. But I think there's also what I'm hearing from you is maybe there is that, because I think that's true for most performers. Yeah. But there's also passion for the art form.
Yes.
And the people who are involved in that art form, and so I'm really impressed at this very unique business model. I'm curious though, and I can't help but, as a business person, as an entrepreneur is, so the theater, it to me feels like a nonprofit. Are you like that? Feels like how it's functioning.
A little.
You're probably not a nonprofit. I didn't hear you say that you were a nonprofit. So do the shareholders? Is there like a dividend or some kind of profit sharing that goes to the shareholders? It all go back to the theater.
It all goes back into the theater.
Okay. Again, a little bit nonprofit-esque, although many businesses make those types of decisions. I'd be interested, how do people who are involved get paid to perform? Is that really the only...
Yeah. We make sure that we can meet a minimum for every stage show that the people do, so that all the performers will get if they get a cut of the audience ticket price usually, but there's a minimum, so you'll get the minimum when you perform. Okay. And then that way at least there's something going back, because we had set a date for January of 2023, because we had then finally finished paying off all of this money for the equipment that the other theater group had gotten that they didn't want to give to us, so we had to buy it. So basically almost all of the revenue that we had went into that. Like when I say that it was a slow process, it was a very slow and painstaking process that literally had us splitting the bill for the bar inventory. Like all of us would, pitch in $50 so that we could actually buy it. And even sometimes it was just one person would be like, all right, I got this month and I got this month. And we would just keep it going, because that's how we were getting revenue. And then we were having to pay those other people back. And then we really had a big fan and benefactor in J.P. Kastner, who is the Presbyterian priest or minister, Presbyterian minister of the Presbyterian Church, Calvary Presbyterian Church, which is our building. He was always a fan of a lot of us improvisers. He likes watching us. And J.P. genuinely during the pandemic, he gave us the best gift ever. And he's like, well, you can't pay yet, so when you can, let me know. But, stay here.
Amazing.
And it was so
what
amazing.
A cool collaboration. An improv comedy theater that's based in a church.
Yep. Oh yeah.
What in it like?
I know.
I don't think anybody would put those two things together.
No, they would not. And there's a church upstairs.
Yeah.
It's still a church.
Right. Right.
Like, it's really weird.
What a really interesting collaboration again. So I'm fascinated by that.
JP, by the way, is one of the coolest people that you can meet because you'd never know he was like a minister at all if you met him. Like the last conversation we had, I think, was about like Riemann's hypothesis. Like we'll just talk about ridiculous, like mathematical, scientific things, like whatever it is. It's so fun because he'll just strike up a conversation. You can just sit there and chat for hours. Like sometimes I volunteered for the voice booth, or not the voice booth, the ticket booth. And as I'm in the box office, he'll just sit there and then he'll wait while I check everybody in, give him a stamp, and then yeah. So what were you saying? And then we just keep chatting the whole time while the shows are happening. I love it. He's a great guy.
So does JP or the church in some way take any kind of active role in sort of governing anything that takes place?
Well, it depends. Like as we've been growing, we have multiple spaces that need to be either rented out to other people based on what the church wants to do or what we need. Now, we had kind of a free hand for a while in which JP was basically, well, because JP now, he's currently, I think he's still finishing his Appalachian walk. Because he goes on these like self-pilgrimages where one year he walked from Mexico to Canada. And then he did the Pilgrim's Trail in Portugal. Yeah. And then he did, right now he's going from, I think, Georgia along the Appalachian Trail to Maine. So that's where he is right now. He's at least working on that. And so we now have who we call JP2, who's another Presbyterian minister called JP.
Come on, really? They're
Seriously,
both JP?
seriously. And he now has kind of bumped up the people that they want in the church in terms of rentals. So there's like a dance company that now practices there and does performances there. There's another theater group that does performances there, like actors, like scripted performances kind of a thing. So we used to have a free hand in using all these different spaces. But what JP did was when we were there was basically be like, if it's open, you can use it. So speaking of adaptability, we now are in the process of figuring out a new system in which all of the groups with administrative obligations can then work together to schedule specific spaces for specific times so that we then aren't stepping on each other's feet. And so that then there can be profit made by the church, or at least revenue by the church, as well as revenue by us from rentals of like each space without stepping on each other's toes. Because we got really close to that like recently. So we're like, okay, all right, let's figure this out. So we're working on all of that. And it just goes to prove more about the co-op, that we keep actually figuring out all of these problems as they come instead of pushing them down the road. It's like, another good problem to solve. Excellent. People are attending so much and we have so much going on that there's not enough space. Okay, how do we subdivide it? How do we make this work? And it's just been so fulfilling to actually see it come to fruition over the course of 4 years and have two really like just dark and trying to make things work kind of years, but not giving up on it. I mean, some people did, but it's usually because, their lives went in this direction or that and they couldn't maintain it anymore. And it's so nice to actually have that happen now. Yeah. It just feels good. It's very satisfying.
That's awesome.
I like it.
So how often do you perform?
Depends on what the schedule is like. I performed on Wednesday this week. I did a show called Palindrome to open for the level 1 students. So all of our levels have a graduation performance after their 8 weeks are up. So we opened for them to try and, just do a fun set and get the audience going.
Get everybody.
Yeah. What's more important to you, headlining or opening?
That's an interesting question. I think headlining always has this connotation of like the better act is going to go on last.
Yeah.
Whenever I've opened, it's been in a music setting.
Yeah.
And it's always been for a national act.
Oh.
And so that's always been kind of like I got to open for, I don't know, name a group, ZZ Top.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Blues Traveler.
Ooh.
REO Speedwagon, so.
Oh, man.
So in that way, it was like kind of really cool that I got to share the stage, not maybe with them, but I was on the same stage before they came on. So that's an honor. I felt an honor, but I guess if I were, if we're two groups that were maybe not famous,
yeah,
I would probably want to be the headliner, but that's an ego thing.
Yeah, it is.
As an audience, that'd be an interesting question to ask your audience.
Hmm.
Because I think, in my experience, in any kind of whether it's a business meeting or it's a performance, you want to start high,
Yes.
and then there's going to be this sort of kind of peaks and valleys along the way, and you want to end high.
Yep.
And so the middle doesn't matter as much. It's the beginning and the end that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so just kind of reflecting on it from an audience standpoint, if you're talking about these are paid customers who are coming to see level 1 graduates,
Mm-hmm.
my hunch is they're not maybe as put together as the opener.
No, you're right, and that's why we actually made it so that the levels 1 and 2 at least, I think also maybe level 3, but level 1 and 2 for sure perform during the week, and those shows are open for free. So we make it so that they can at least have an audience because, like you said, they're quite unrefined, but they're trying and they're giving it their all, and we just want them to have an audience so that they can enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
But when it comes to what is more important, you're absolutely right. It depends on are you known. The headliner, in my view, is the draw. That's what gets an audience there, or who should get an audience there.
You bet.
The opener sets the tone for the night and the energy, and they make they start the train moving, right?
Mm-hmm,
like they stoke the ovens in order to get the thing going. And you really need to have a solid opener in order to have a good headlining act, because you don't want people waiting for the headliner. You want them to be swept up by the opener so that then they're like, oh, and then, oh, that's right. It's like when you're early enough at the movie theater and you watch all the all the trailers, and you're like, this was a good trailer. And then you get to the movie, you're like, that's right, I'm here to see this.
Yeah, so I think of the phrase priming the pump, which is a really old reference, by the way.
I understand.
And I don't know, the younger viewers and listeners might go, what? Priming the pump? But anyway, but that's what you're doing. You're priming the audience. And that totally makes sense. I think they're going to be more receptive to their performance, the level 1 graduates, if you will, than they would have been if you started with the level 1 and then done. I actually think it's a genius move. Because it made sense. It warms up the audience, gets them ready for that brand, that style of humor. Yeah. So that you're going to get a better crowd response for those level 1s, and that's just going to make their performance even better.
Yeah, because then they can ride those waves.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a concept that I brought to the theater with the beginning of the musical improv intensive that I do with Megan Heinrich.
Yeah.
Is that their graduation performances are Friday headlining, and so they immediately, it's like, yep, you're headlining. That's it. You go right into the meat grinder.
I really love the selfless nature of that, because you're really focused on your students and what's going to be the best outcome for them, and that in a performance setting is a very selfless thing to do, in my view.
I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I just
again, going back to our conversation about ego.
Yeah.
And the things that it takes a little bit of ego to get up in front. Yeah. I think. But yeah, I don't know. This is really, really kind of a fascinating. I'm definitely thankful that I've gotten the opportunity to learn more about the theater. Now, what's it called again for everybody?
Interchange Theater Co-op.
Interchange Theater Co-op, and this is in Milwaukee.
Yep, right downtown Milwaukee on Marquette's campus, actually. If you go through the interchange, like the physical, like spaghetti bowl of interchanges on the south side, you'll see that red church with a really big, thin, tall spire, which, by the way, is a single tree. That's really weird, but it was taken from an old growth tree.
Really?
When it was built in the 18 whatevers. I can't remember what year, but that was
interesting nugget there. A little factoid.
And it was you can go to interchangetheater.com and then see all the things that we're working on. You can see how to become an owner, see our shows. It is worth a trip. It's worth seeing what we do. It's definitely worth taking our classes, because I've been saying this for years, because I knew it was going to happen from before we even really genuinely signed the papers. It was really in that same call with Eric. I remember being like, I think that we have a chance if we get the right team of people with the right mindset. And it was a big if, but it was like, if at the very least I can contribute in all the ways that I feel like I can contribute, and I can just keep looking after my side of it, and everyone else will do the same, and all the pieces will fall into place, we will have the hub for long form improv in Wisconsin at least. And I think we're on our way there. We're actually on our way there. And we've implemented so much of the other, so many elements of the other arts and creative area aspects that we specialize in into this theater. Right in the lobby, I actually have a sculpture of the physical interchange, the highway interchange from the sky that lights up on the back, so it looks like traffic is going along them.
I saw that on your social media. Now you're connecting the dots for me.
Yeah. So that's like, that is a big deal for me. Eric, our general manager, is also an amazing woodworker and carpenter. So he does some work of his own. He also does a lot of like science experiments and stuff. So he has some pretty neat sculptures there. And we try and implement as much as we possibly can of ourselves into it, because if all of us give a little, well, it's like many hands make light work, right? It just makes the whole thing go so much smoother, and people be impressed because all of us gave that 5% that we needed to, but we gave all of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's on its way. It's genuinely on its way. We're about to have this fall, our first level 5 capstone class of students, because, people come and go in terms of the classes. They then do other things. They wait for the class to come, and then there's not enough people to meet our minimums because we have to make sure that we can pay our instructors, obviously.
Right.
And then as we keep moving through it, we are now actually doing, for the second time this summer, the second level 4. So I taught one of the first ones, not the first ones, but like the second or third. And then I'm going to be teaching this summer level 4. That'll then be prepping another group to go into level 5, which is the capstone, where they make a show specifically out of the blue as a group and then put it on, field it at our theater. And it's amazing to have been a part of that really long process of getting from nothing, a bunch of people who were really passionate about it, to a functioning theater. And you couldn't have done it without everyone who was involved in it from that beginning point to now, in whatever fashion it was. It all came together. And I love that because one of my, it is on a personal note, and this is not the theater's natural position, this is my position. It was built by people who had been screwed over, and had been screwed over enough, and by enough people and by enough situations, that we just started to realize that it was like, we can do something about this, and we can make a place where people can do the things that we always wished we could have done, and not been so encumbered by and pushed backward so many steps.
Sure.
And we're doing it. So I absolutely love it. There's so many lessons in the past, and the past of all of the people who built it, of getting burnt and getting pushed down and knocked over and pushed aside and forgotten about. And the fact that we finally all took that and made it into a functioning theater that can then work for those people who are going to just keep riding that wave of becoming, I'm going to be a professional improviser. It's like, great, you do that. Just be a good person, please. And they will be. They do.
Sure.
And then there's the two tracks. If you just want to kind of do improv, great, do it casually. Come on over, take some classes, join some groups. Or you want to do it professionally.
So I'll say the paid performances then, are those typically a troupe that's been together, or do you kind of just like, hey, we've got a show tonight, who can make it?
It depends. House shows are like, let's say Professor Palindrome, which I was in this Wednesday. That's a group of performers who sometimes there's a little bit of turnover with people who then leave, and then other people who come in, and we do auditions for all of the groups essentially at the same time. And that group will then be together, and they just have the house team rate of basically either getting your minimums or inviting enough people in the audience that you then get a bigger cut of whatever the ticket split is. So then if it's traveling team, that's my forte. So I'm corporate education. So what I do is I work with all those clients in order to create either corporate workshops or traveling shows, because I just know how to build those things. And that's a very small group now that will soon be expanding. And the way that I run that is it's all about quality assurance, because we only have one shot at it, right? And we're going to a specific place. And I have basically the same group that I had in 2020 when we started doing the Zoom shows. Because I reached out to almost everybody that I was like, this person, in order to be on the traveling team, I was like, you need to know intimately and expertly short form, long form, how to host, and how to deal with a client. You need to be able to do all of it. And if you can do all of it, then you're qualified to be on the traveling teams, because what if something happens, right? What if there's 4 of us on and 2 of us are sick? How are the other 2 going to do another show? Well, they can, because I have confidence in each of them because they can do it. Like I've seen them do that kind of a thing. So when we're doing the traveling shows, the way that I do it is that there's a percentage that goes to the theater from the fee that the client pays. A percentage goes to the theater because that's then the space that we use to train and rehearse
Sure.
and do whatever. And you
Yep.
know, it's the hub.
Yep.
And then the other percentage is then split evenly amongst all the performers, and that includes me. So I don't get anything extra for any of the work that I do,
Sure.
and that's okay by my standards because it kind of makes sure that I'm doing the right thing. And that I'm like, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to have an upper hand on anyone.
The right, yeah. You want to have the right motivation. And,
Yeah.
And there's also an element of sustainability in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, based on your experience, when it's owned by a small group of people, they make decisions that will, in the short term, have a favorable outcome for them, but in the long term may actually be damaging. And so I can see the sort of long play in that mindset by treating everybody equal, even though you technically do put in more effort. You create an environment, a community that's going to be more sustaining, which will give you an opportunity 10 years, 20 years or more from now, because that will still be around.
Yep. Yeah. And
So I get the wisdom in that approach.
yeah. Also knowing that if you do it right, most of the clients you get are going to be repeat clients. You want to build an actual, not just a relationship, you want to build friendship. You actually want to be personal with them.
Right.
Get to know what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their company. That's why like our partnership with the Great Lakes Hemophilia Foundation is so fun, because we know each other, right? And this year we're going to their conference in Wisconsin Dells to teach a bunch of kids like how to have self-confidence and how to have fun while learning how to you know handle their condition. So I love it.
Doug, so here's a question, kind of getting into the personal. When you think about a group like that, obviously we're talking about a very serious condition. I don't know if you would call it an illness, but
I'm not sure what it would be called. I should know this, shouldn't I?
Yeah, but
Hemophilia.
you know, humor is healing in so many settings. Thinking about that client again, you know them so well, you're working with them constantly. Are they open to bringing humor in, even about hemophilia? Is that
Well, it depends. Well,
does
like,
that become like sensitive territory? That
I think it's always sensitive. It's just my experience with people who are going through medical issues. It kind of depends on where they're at in that process. If it's fresh, probably best to be more distracting. If they've accepted it, or at the very least they're working on it, it's fine to at least be open to it. Don't start that conversation. Just listen. See when it's time to talk about it. And with as far as the GLHF goes, it's very straightforward because all of those parts of the process, that's what they're working on. That's what they're helping kids through. And that's like genuinely, like that's the driving force behind why I absolutely make sure to make that contact every year so that we can help them, because they almost always are so busy trying to find sponsors and funding to be able to, you know, make this stuff work.
right?
And I always make sure that it's like at a lower rate than it would normally be, because it's like, we need you to, like, first off, we appreciate your business. Second off, I want to keep doing this for you because it's really nice to be able to see a bunch of people and kids who are living with this, and they're great. They're wonderful. They're so fun. They're so full of life and energy and enthusiasm about just doing stuff. And mainly what they do is train kids like, this is how you take care of yourself, because you can't rely on others to take care of you. So you have to do it. And other people will want to, but you'll know how, you know, and we'll educate you on it. And what was the question? I think I completely lost it.
Well, I was kind of curious about the sensitive nature of illness or conditions,
and joking
health
about it.
conditions, and then, you know,
That's right.
bringing humor into that setting as a coping mechanism, as a healing mechanism. But just curious if, as a client, if that's like how that, because that can be tricky, right?
Very much so, yeah.
And I'm just curious what your experience has been in that setting.
Okay. All right. So then, okay. So backing away from GLHF, but answering that question specifically, I think there's two things that can kind of enlighten you on that.
Yeah.
One, if somebody is in that rough place, and you'll have a lot of performers that are in that rough place too, it helps to talk about it, but it can't be forced. It has to be the person coming to you, or the person at least acknowledging that something's bothering them. And that's usually more than enough to at least be able to say, hey, like if they're about to come out on stage with us and you can tell something's bothering them, privately, one-on-one, instead of with the whole group, unless the group is that tight-knit, which isn't that common, but some groups are like that. Take them into the side and basically just say like, hey, if there's something you want to talk about, by all means, we can talk about it. If you don't want anyone to know, that's totally fine. I just noticed that you seem a little bit off, and that's okay. That's just more of I want to make sure that you're okay because we're about to go out on stage and do this fun thing together. I want to make sure that you're going to have fun. And sometimes it's much better for someone to be either to make the decision that I do need to be home right now, or I just want to watch, or it is the best decision for them to go out and play. And when we do, it's about in that time, in that place, not pushing any kind of data retrieval as it was about like what they're going through, but more to play the distraction in the beginning. And then you'll probably be surprised with what they'll bring into it, because then they might bring that problem into it and exercise that on stage.
Yeah.
And that's perfect because it's basically just creating a little arena that they can then work in, right? The other thing that I would say, kind of playing to what might be on the public mind that is to be avoided at times but could totally be addressed at others, is that the last show that I did at Ampersand in our same space, when the space was owned by Ampersand, which a lot of people thought that Interchange was like, oh, Ampersand's Interchange now? It's like, no, completely different company. But Ampersand, when we were there, we did a show called Harmondo, which was a musical improv group, and it was one of the best groups I've ever been a part of. It was amazing. We would do a whole musical, improvise a whole one from the beginning to the end, and the pandemic was coming. This was the weekend before it, right?
Okay.
So it was on this Friday, pandemic, and so it was Saturday. And when we went out, because everyone could feel it coming, before we went out, our coach and all of us, we talked and we were like, okay, you know what we're going to do? Because we had an opener. The opener went out. And right when they went out, we were like, okay, we're not going to talk about pandemics. We're not going to talk about illness. We're not going to talk about death. If we can help it, we'll just avoid all of that. Because remember, what are your options? Literally everything else. So it's not so limiting. And we talked about that. The other group did not. And their set, I think they stopped themselves. They have a half hour. They stopped themselves, I think, at 17 minutes because they didn't get a single laugh.
Oh,
It's
no.
the only time I have ever actually heard that. I've never seen a group get zero laughs. And it wasn't so much that they were doing bad comedy, but that they dove into pandemic and sickness and death and, stacking bodies. And it was like, oh, no, don't do that. And it got absolutely nothing. And so then we went out and we absolutely knocked them dead. They loved it. They forgot about it for a while.
Sure.
And that was the objective.
That was the thing, yeah.
And the thing is, having that, it's not that the humor is healing as though we can address it, we can talk about it, but it'll be funny at times. Sometimes it's just a reprieve.
Yeah.
And that's the healing bit.
Yeah, so going back to a sentiment that's kind of come up a number of times, the idea that improv comedy helps you be a better person. This kind of rings true again, this idea that helping people cope with any kind of challenge in their life, not just the illness or sickness that we talked about earlier, but might be some other dynamic that they're dealing with, that the timing, like so much humor, is important.
Yep.
And the idea, so the nugget that I'm taking away is when it's fresh, it's probably best to avoid or maybe give them a way of an escape for a period of time.
Yeah.
Like something else to think about or focus on so you don't have to focus on the thing. And then the other nugget was let them bring whoever it is that's dealing.
Yep.
Let them bring it in and open it up. And when they do, then that's a signal to you that, they've brought it in and now they're dealing and you can help in that dealing. So anyway, there's some really kind of profound
Yeah, there's a lot of
nuggets
connections and how it works.
that in terms of just human interaction that are coming out of this whole improv themed conversation. Of course, CJ, again, improv is a big part of what you do, among the other things. So take me back, maybe, how did you get into the video game music thing? So recapping, because I think we lost this part earlier, but you have an album coming out that you're going to be releasing to Spotify, Apple Music, probably some other places.
Yeah.
That is music that you wrote for a video game.
Yes, I wrote all of the lyrics and arranged everything, and then the music itself was created with Kevin MacLeod. So Kevin wrote it all essentially, and then he gave it to me, and he was like, "All right, make it work." and then I just went to town on it for about 2 weeks, and just did everything that was necessary, because this was like 2 years ago that we actually jumped into the project.
Okay.
And I then got back to it recently. It was really this like January or February, and I was like, I think I could make an album out of this, because the thing is, it worked for the video game. It worked. It was fine. But then I was like, this could actually be a really good album. And Kevin agreed. And he's like, go ahead, do it, like, by all means. And
that's awesome.
And I jumped into it. And the origin of then doing video game music and helping with that kind of thing and being a part of that that scene, I guess if you want to call it, is Kevin. Because Kevin is an internationally renowned composer. He created royaltyfree.com and incompetech.com, and basically created music for free to give away. Just look up Kevin MacLeod. You'll be able to find him. Anyone, not you, but
Sure.
like anyone out there, just look up Kevin MacLeod. You'll find millions and millions and millions and millions of things on him, as well as things with his music in it.
Okay.
And he and I have been good friends since 2014. 2014-15 is really when we became really good friends. But we met each other in 2010. And the thing is that he was already pretty internationally renowned and famous then, because he had really gotten his like big break in like 99, 2000,
Sure.
when he created that, free music and graph paper in Compotech. And when I met him, I didn't really know who he was. And I didn't really care, because I was like, I can be friendly.
Yeah,
and
right.
we hit it off very simply in the beginning. And it was just like, because he would be sitting outside, and I would then come outside as well, just to like take a break, be away from it all. Because I don't particularly like being in crowds for very long. Like, I can do it, but it's like, I'd rather just kind of sit with one or two other people, or just we'll go for a walk by myself.
Sure.
And when we were hanging out outside, he and I both have this shared interest in history, especially like military technology and things like that. So we started talking about tanks. And as we were talking about tanks, and we just started chatting about that. And that literally then became our like almost an inside joke, is that every time that he'd be back in town from New York, because he lived in New York at the time, and then he'd come back to De Pere to be a part of the troupe and do some music with us and just hang out and see his friends. And we would always hang out for just a little bit, like half an hour, an hour and a half.
Okay.
And then when I then graduated school and then was living up there with my friend and started to kind of try and figure out what I was going to be doing with my life, I was at the club all the time performing. So I started seeing him more often, because he then moved back to Green Bay, and he had a house by Lambeau Field. And I think my senior year of college, he then was looking for people to do voiceover work for a different video game called EvaCon. And this video game was like another like fantastical kind of like Game of Thrones-y kind of a mobile app game. And he was writing the music for it and needed people to do voices, because it was an Italian game. So this Italian dude was making it.
Okay.
And so it's always someone from all over the world. And I came in and I did some voices with him, and we had a great time just chatting and doing the voices. And I had no experience with voiceover work at that point. I just knew how to do different voices and stuff. So I learned a lot that day with him, because he'd just be like, here, let's do this. We'll figure this out. But he was super kind, and he was super like, also he'd critique you straight away without like very objectively. And I really appreciated that, because how many people really you just barely know, like we knew each other, but we didn't know each other that well, were forward about that kind of thing. And I appreciated that. Because it was like, oh, good, excellent, wonderful. Now I know what I'm doing wrong. I can fix it. And we then just started hitting it off. And one day after shows, he was like, he hadn't had much to drink. I had quite a bit. I wasn't drunk, but I had enough where it's like, I don't even want to walk home. And he's like, you want to come back to my house and we'll just do some VR stuff? Because he was also one of the people who first did the testing for VR systems for the audio.
Okay.
And so he had one and he sat me down and I just looked at planets. Like in scale, it was amazing. I was in space,
Yeah.
and the two of us just had a great time. He then called me an Uber to get me home, and that was like the beginning of him just being like, "You should come over. We should hang out. We should do something." And that relationship is probably one of the most important ones in my life because I think that we understand each other. Because I never acknowledged nor really cared about the size of the, oh my God, it's the Kevin. And it was like, no, I don't. He's a fun, kind, very smart man, and we get along.
Right.
So I want to hang out with him, and that's basically what it became.
That's what relationships should be.
It should be because
Right?
and we both liked doing stuff.
Yeah.
So now, like this summer, I'm going to be living with him for like every summer. I teach comics and cartoons at the Art Garage in Green Bay,
Okay.
and so I live with him for the week or two or three that I
While you're
teach,
doing that.
and it's great.
So the way you guys met though was through the improv comedy troupe.
Yep, through
So
improv comedy.
You guys were both at Comedy City, right, in De Pere?
Yep, he was visiting by that time because he was living in New York at the time.
So
he
he
lived
had
in
been
Manhattan.
in- but
he had been there. He had been in the troupe, and he
Got
was
it.
doing
Yeah, okay.
just musical accompaniment.
So you got to know Kevin. Kevin's like, hey, I'm doing this new video game. Want your help?
Mhm.
And so that's the sort of synthesis or impetus rather to you creating this music. And now you're going to have an album that is this video game music that's going to be on Spotify. So if people want to find it, what should they look for?
They should look up The Siege Machine, just
Siege
one
Machine.
word. So capital
Yep.
THE, capital SIEGE, capital MACHINE. And then if you look that up on like Spotify or any of those music apps, you'll be able to find me. And then this one in particular, like just go to the discography and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see the album there. But you'll also be able to see, you should be able to look up Adventurer's Repose, if that'll help.
Okay.
But you're going to have more luck with The Siege Machine.
Siege Machine.
Yeah.
So Adventures Repose, though, that's the name of the video game.
That's the name of the video game and the name of the tavern. So
Yeah.
I'm still kind of back and forth as to what the album name will be called. I think it'll just be The Adventurer's Repose,
Sure.
and then that'll be enough. Because I don't want to call it a soundtrack, because it
Sure.
is, but it's also kind of slightly separate. But then I also recommend people go to danger.academy, and that's Kevin's website that then also has access to all of those games that Preston makes. So you can just play the game for free.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
it. Just play. It's
Very
a
cool.
it's a very fun game. You'll hear the music in
cool.
there right now, and then the album will be out very
So
soon.
if you're playing the game for free, is it a PC-based game?
It's
Is it-
PC based. I think that there was a plugin. There's plugins that you can use for Mac in order to play it, but I just go PC. Most of it is PC. I
Got
think.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the game released? So you can get it
The game is
today?
released. Yeah, you can
Okay.
get it today. You can just go to danger.academy
And then-
and you'll be able to find it there. And it's The Adventurer's Repose. There's a bunch of other games there that are all super different, which is nice. They're not like all in the same category. They're all very different, all free to play. And I highly recommend all of them because they're all just basically Preston's adventure in learning how to do video games even better, making more and more better games. And he's
Okay.
really good at it.
Okay.
And they're all scored by Kevin, and in this case, Kevin and myself.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I love it. He throws you fastballs if he thinks you can catch it. So that's
That's great.
That's-
I mean, it sounds like a great partnership, great relationship. So I can understand the sort of very genuine sentiment that, that's been an impactful
yeah.
relationship in your life. I need to move us towards some kind of closure. This
I
is
know.
going to be a mess to put together. So for anybody that's listened or watched to the end of this episode, I truly, you are a fan of the show. And I appreciate you.
I do too. Thank you.
Because
And I apologize.
There's a bit of mess here, and there's some long-windedness, and hopefully that you were entertained, but also informed. But before we leave the show, I want to just a few nuggets for the audience in terms of, I'll say maybe some recommendations. So obviously the Interchange Theater is something that everybody should be on their list, get their first show, consider taking a class.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll find it to be profoundly life-changing. That's the sense that I get in talking to you. I know, CJ, that I want to take a class.
Yes.
And so this, I pride myself on stretching myself, and so this would be a good opportunity for me
Oh yeah.
because it scares the hell out of me. And I like being on stage with a microphone in front of a crowd. And so if it scares me, I'm sure it scares other people. All right, so that's okay. Taking a show, maybe several shows.
Yep.
I would recommend taking a class.
Yeah. Well, just check out TheSiegeMachine right now. I think that you'll find something that you like there. There are a few albums there that are very intriguing. The most recent one was from a while ago. So at this point, I'm basically just trying to organize the things that I've made over the last 3.5, 4 years and get them out, because I haven't been releasing things because I've taken the time to produce better. Like just learn how to make better sounding things.
Yep.
And so now I'm starting to release it. So just keep up with the TheSiegeMachine. The Adventures Repose will be out soon.
TheSiegeMachine on your favorite music streaming platform.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we also titled TheSiegeMachine have a new cocktail.
Yes.
That was designed in honor of our guest, CJ Guzan.
Yes, it's delicious, by the way.
And so, again, this is a gin and tonic based cocktail with swamp juice. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know. It just looks like swamp juice.
You guys want your swamp juice?
But it is a courgette and kiwi syrup along with some gin and some tonic and a few other ingredients. But you'll be able to find that episode, or that recipe rather, on the podcast website, Ampéritif.com, Amperitif.com. So again, thank you, CJ, for being here, and it's been an absolute pleasure. We covered a lot of territory. We lost some video along the way, but I think there's still some valuable conversation in there that I hope our audience enjoys.
Yeah, I got here on Friday. It's Sunday morning. We finally figured it out. We navigated through, and I had a great time. I genuinely had an absolutely great time talking to you. It's been forever since I've seen you, and you're one of the very few people in my life that I genuinely think about more often than you would think. Like, I think about you probably once a month, just like, I wonder how Mike's doing.
Yeah. Well, that's thoughtful. That's very nice.
And it feels like we never left. You know what I mean? Like we left off right. We picked up where we left off.
Yeah.
Right when I showed up. It was amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me as a guest. I love your podcast. I very, very much enjoy it.
Thank you.
Final tidbit. Remember when Heather was in her episode of how she was talking about in the JJ Keller videos being an assaulter? You know who she was talking about?
Was it you?
It was me.
You. So is your arm still numb?
A little bit, yeah. I know. She was like, it felt weird. I'm like, thanks, Heather. I'm softer these days.
That's awesome. So now everybody's going to have to go back and watch that episode so they can pick out that little part. But thanks for that. Thanks for connecting those dots,
yes,
CJ.
episode 6, Heather Arndt. It was great. I love that one.
Outstanding. Well, all right. That's it for us. Thanks again, CJ. And we're going to piece this thing together, and it'll be all right.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Signing off. Oh, hey, one more thing. We'd love it if you followed us on social. Ampéritif on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Pinterest. And Ampéritif Podcast on Instagram. Hey there, Ampéritif Podcast viewers and listeners. I've got a slight correction from episode 9 with CJ Guzan. In this episode, we talked to CJ about some work that he did on the soundtrack for a video game called Adventures Repose. When he tells viewers and listeners where to go find more information about this game, he references a website called Danger Academy. CJ contacted me after the show and said, hey, Mike, I screwed up. I meant to say janecast.com. So that's JANEKASS.com. That's where you can go to find out more information about the Adventures Repose. Download it, try it out, listen to some of CJ's music, and if you wouldn't mind, like and follow the Ampéritif Podcast on your favorite social media platform. Thanks for listening.